Last week, we were studying the goods of marriage. Okay? There are goods of marriage, what marriage consists in. Can someone tell me what the goods of marriage are? I'm hoping that Mr. Pitpain wrote them on the board. Did he? Did he write the goods of marriage on the board for you? So you took some notes maybe? I don't know what he did. There are 3 goods of marriage. Did you write any in your notebooks? Because if you didn't, I'll have to write it on the board so you'll know it. Okay.
Yeah, we got, love, free will, and rest.
No, that's not the 3 goods of marriage.
There's 3 things that it gives. Natural is... that's human. Yeah, that's human.
Okay, the 3 goods of marriage. One is what?
Natural institution.
Well, it's a natural institution, but that's not a good of the marriage. Marriage is a natural institution. Okay, we know that. God founded it when? With Adam and Eve. Okay, right at the beginning. Man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, the two become one flesh. That's marriage, right at the beginning. Okay, Adam and Eve. That's marriage, a natural institution. But there are 3 goods of marriage. What make up marriage? It's the marriage promises. When you stand up and you promise to each other, you're promising these goods. Katie, what?
I don't know.
You don't know? We'll take a guess. 3 goods of marriage, okay?
Ratification and consummation is what he said.
Okay, well, that has to be done in order for it to be a valid marriage. Okay, it has to be consummated. Okay, the man and the woman have to do the marriage act. Okay, that consummates the marriage. But the 3 goods of marriage concern what you're vowing to. Okay, if ever any of you ever get married, have you been at marriages? What do you promise? What does the priest say? Do you promise what? Carrie, what? You had your hand up. Okay. One. Okay. One is what? What? Who is what? No.
Rich or poor?
Yeah.
Rich or poor? Well, rich or poor for what? For what though? What are you saying? If you're for rich or for poor, for better, for worse, until
Death do you
part. Okay. So the first good of marriage is permanency. Okay. Permanency. Okay.
We didn't get the legitimate word. We got the what's it?
Okay. Permanency, or there's another word for this. Okay. Indissolubility. Okay. Indissolubility means you're married for good until death. Okay. Until death. Okay. That's what marriage is. You're married until death. Death ends the marriage bond. Okay. That's what ends it. It's permanent. Okay. Yes.
So if one of the people dies, it's really no big deal if you get married again, or
You are free to marry if the spouse dies. Yes, because marriage ends. Jesus. Okay. Wait. We're not talking about annulments. That's jumping ahead. Okay. But okay. Permanency, indissolubility means until death. Death ends the marriage bond. That is why people are free to marry if their spouse dies. Jesus was asked by one of the scribes, okay, well, what happens if a man dies, his brother marries him, and he dies, and she marries another brother, and he dies, she marries. 7 married her. Whose wife is she going to be in the kingdom? And what does Jesus say? You don't understand. There is no marriage in the kingdom, in heaven. Marriage is an earthly institution. That's why you're free to marry again. Okay? The marriage bond ends at death. Okay? Death, it's until death. The marriage bond, okay? Marriage bond ends. Okay? It ends at death. Okay? That's it. Okay? That's the first good of marriage. Now, people, when they marry, they're vowing to this. They're taking a promise, saying, I'm promising to you, this other person, that we're going to remain married until death. So, this is why Jesus says, okay, what God has joined, No human power can separate. Okay? What God has joined, okay, God has joined. No human power can separate. Okay? Now, this is really important, and that is Matthew, okay, chapter 19. Actually, it's verses 1 to 9 where Jesus talks about marriage, because the scribes and the Pharisees, they disagreed with Jesus when he said this. Jesus said a man who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. And the scribes and Pharisees said, wait a minute. Moses allows for a bill of divorce. Who are you to come along and say, we can't divorce our wives? Because many of the scribes and Pharisees had divorced their wives, obviously, and married again. Jesus said this is adultery. And what did Jesus respond? He said, it was not that way in the beginning. In the beginning, a man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, the two become one flesh, one body, and what God has joined, no human power can separate. So what did Jesus do? With these words, he restored marriage to its original idea by God, being permanent, indissoluble. Jesus restored marriage. This is his teaching. Now, I am a lawyer. I could have been a judge, okay, either appointed or elected. Okay. There are judges who sign divorce decrees in civil court. And the divorce decree says the marriage bond between Joe and Mary, whatever, is ended. And under the laws of the state, they are free to marry now. In the Catholic Church's eyes, in God's eyes, no. Why? Because what God has joined, no human power can separate. A judge in a civil court can't undo what God has done. There's no human power can undo what God has done. Okay. Yes, Carrie?
What if you don't get married in the church?
Well, that's a different question. If you are not married in the church, then the marriage is null and void. Okay? I have a nephew, it's my cousin's child, okay, who was just civilly married. He's a Catholic, but he didn't want to get married in the church because he and his wife, who was not Catholic, they wanted to get married at some waterfall somewhere, so they just had some Protestant minister come and do this. So they invited me to the wedding. Well, I couldn't go because I'm not going to go to a wedding that's just a wedding in name only. Jesus wasn't invited to the wedding, in other words. God didn't join them. If you're a Catholic, you have to get married under the Catholic form of marriage. You can't go out and do your own thing. You say, well, I'm going to get married, just go fly out to Vegas and go before a justice of the peace or go before a Protestant minister. Now, if you have the bishop's permission, the permission of the church, in other words, you can have the marriage ceremony performed in a Protestant church, okay, if someone's marrying a Protestant. Okay. That's allowed as long as you get permission. But you need permission. Okay. And you have to get preparation for marriage through the Catholic Church. Well, I call him my nephew, okay? He didn't do this, so I didn't go to the wedding. I said, well, I'm not going to go because nothing's happening there. Okay? God isn't joining you, okay? So if that happens, if people get married civilly, and I deal with cases all the time, people come to me and they say, well, we were married, we thought we'd do our own thing, now we want to get married in the church, really get married. I said, okay, fine. And they have to state their marriage vows again before me, the priests. And as the priest, I don't administer the sacrament of marriage to them. They do themselves. Their exchange of their vows is they're the ministers of the sacrament, but I have to be there as an official witness for the church. Or if it's a Protestant minister, with the church's approval. If someone gets married outside the church, they're not married in the eyes of God. Okay? You asked, Michael, about annulment. Okay? Now, what an annulment means, And the annulment is based upon the teaching of Jesus. Jesus says, a man who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery unless the marriage was unlawful. If the marriage was unlawful. That's the basis for an annulment. When would a marriage be unlawful? I'll give you some examples. What if someone comes to this country and they want to be a citizen? You know how you become a citizen? You get married. Yeah, you get married. You are a citizen automatically if you get married to a U.S. citizen. So what if someone gets married, but they're not intending to get married until death? They're intending to get married just so they can become a citizen, and then it's sayonara, bye-bye. I'll see you, okay? Now I'm a citizen, okay? Some people do this. So the church would investigate this and say, if this person did not have an intention of remaining married, they just use marriage as a means to get an annulment, well then there's no marriage. The church will declare an annulment, it's an unlawful marriage. God knows the people's intention, okay? So the church would grant an annulment in that case. People are free to marry them. Okay? I'll give you another example. This is someone who, I have a relative who married someone, and this guy, her husband, was out 2, 3, 4 nights a week, all night, coming back in the morning. She said, well, where were you? You wouldn't say. Okay. Well, she finds out, I don't know how she found out, but she found out, maybe he admitted it, that he was an active homosexual. And well, she petitioned for an annulment because she said, I'm not going to be married to this man. He married me under false pretenses, okay? This was a hidden fault that I didn't know about, and I would not have married him under this circumstance. And he's not living a chaste life anyway. That would be a case for an annulment. Another case, if someone married someone who was a drug addict or an alcoholic and didn't know this, and this came to be known after they were married, okay, they had a severe problem, okay, that could be a grounds for an annulment because this was a hidden fault. Now, if someone turned out to be an alcoholic later, you're still married, okay? This is what it means for better or for worse, for rich or for poor, in sickness and in health, okay? Just a minute, I'll give you one more example of what marriage until death means, okay? Because I use this example with couples that are preparing for marriage with me, okay? What indissolubility means, okay? I'll give you 2 examples. One was real life, okay? I encountered a young couple in the first years of my priesthood. After they're married, they're out riding horses. He falls off a horse and breaks his neck. And he's a quadriplegic for the rest of his life. Well, they're married. The marriage bond remains until death. Okay? She can't walk away from this, okay? As difficult as this may be. Now, a week before the marriage, he falls off the horse, breaks his neck, and she walk away? Absolutely. I mean, if she wanted to marry him, she would say, I'll marry you under the circumstance, even though it's difficult. But she's not bound to do so. She can walk away before the marriage because you haven't taken that promise before God, okay? So she could have walked away, but after the marriage, no. Now, what if someone's married and after 5 years or after 10 years, after 15 years, after 20 years of marriage, someone's unfaithful and they go off with someone else? Doesn't end the marriage bond. It's permanent. See, you can do nothing to end the marriage bond. Even your infidelity doesn't end the marriage bond. And I've worked with people successfully and brought them back together even after someone's been unfaithful. That's what forgiveness is. That's what the sacrament of penance is. Yes.
I have a question.
Well, let's Emma ask hers first. You have a question?
She can go.
Okay.
She
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
What if, he is cheating on you and then he falls off his horse on the way home and he gets paralyzed, but can you get an annulment since he was cheating on you? Or
No, see, the cheating, the infidelity does not, okay? Okay, well, listen, this is important, okay? Infidelity does not break the marriage bond. Okay? It doesn't break the marriage bond. You remain married. God has joined you. Okay? So even though someone's unfaithful,
When he just said if he's paralyzed, you can't walk away from it, but he was being unfaithful.
He said you can't walk away from it.
you can't.
But he was riding a horse.
Wait a minute. Your question is, you provided two circumstances that people think, well, maybe you can walk away from, get an annulment. No, you can't. Okay? Infidelity does not end the marriage. If one or both spouses are unfaithful, that doesn't mean the marriage bond is over. No, that means they have to try to get back together and okay. Saint Paul, okay, Saint Paul teaches that if in some circumstances a separation may be necessary, say someone is violent and alcoholic, you can separate from them, but you cannot remarry because you're in a bond that is unbreakable. That God has joined you and made you one flesh. Okay, made you one flesh.
Okay. So, but if the person is cheating on you before you get married, and then you get married, and you find out that they've been cheating on you the whole time.
That could be evidence that the person had an intention against, well, maybe not permanency, but the second good of marriage. After permanency, I'm going to erase this, okay? One is permanency, okay? Until death, okay? That's the first good of marriage, okay? Okay? Second good of marriage, just a minute. Second good of marriage, okay, is, okay, I'm sure Mr. Pittman covered this last week. Second good of marriage, besides permanency, until death do you part, okay, is I promise to be faithful and true to you, okay? Fidelity, okay? Fidelity. That's the second good of marriage. Yes, Emma. Yes.
Can I ask my question?
Yes, you may.
So, you know how you said like you can't
Hey, everyone. Questions being asked?
permit everything's in place, but what happens if I get like if somebody gets sick like after or everything like that, but what happens if you have a family with this person and then they become like abusive and then they like start abusing your family? It puts everyone in the family in danger.
Then you may separate from that person, but you cannot remarry because you're bound.
Okay, so you can.
You can separate. That's what I just said. St. Paul even says this in his letters. He says, if there are problems, because sometimes you have problems, say someone's violent, you have to separate. But he says you cannot remarry because why? God has joined you in an indissoluble bond that nothing can break until death. And I've had people had problems like this, and they get back together after some counseling. Okay, that's what they should try to do. Not just say, "Oh, the marriage is over because something happened like this." No, you try to work it out. You try. Sometimes people are separated for years and then come back together and are able to then have even a stronger love for each other because they've overcome their problems. God's grace is available to people. That's the sacrament of marriage. Okay?
So.
That's the sacrament. You get graces to help you.
Yeah, that makes
So,
sense.
okay.
But do you think sometimes? Do you think sometimes you think things are like beyond repair? That sometimes it's best for them just to stay completely.
Well, then
separated?
they would remain separated. Yeah, sometimes because if things are so bad, and you can't go back to this person. Yes, there are cases I've seen that happen too. And you just say, well, you have to stay away from this person. If someone's committing serial adultery, adultery is a cause for separation, especially in our present day and age with the amount that the frequency of sexually transmitted diseases. You don't want to be having sexual relations with a spouse that's having sex with other people and maybe has some incurable disease like genital herpes. Okay, so yes, David.
What is the point of an annulment then if you can't get
No, an annulment means that the marriage is declared, it never took place at the beginning. You can remarry after an annulment. Okay? If someone, I'll give you another example of a cause for an annulment. Okay? If someone married someone and they were psychotic, they weren't in touch with reality. Okay? And it was learned afterwards that they were maybe had a split personality, something like that. If this condition were present at the time of the marriage, and you didn't know about it, and you married this person, that could be a ground for an annulment. The church says there's no marriage here because God didn't join you, because you married under false pretenses. There's no marriage bond here. You're free to marry. An annulment means you're free to marry. Okay, that's what it means. Yes.
So if you get divorced because your spouse is unfaithful, you can't get an annulment?
No. But you may have.
My aunt's husband cheated on her, so she got an annulment after they got divorced.
Okay. Well, there must have been a reason for the annulment. Okay. Sometimes if there, you have to listen. Okay. Sometimes if there is infidelity, okay. Michael, I'm speaking. Okay. Sometimes if there is infidelity, that could be a sign that there was infidelity maybe before the marriage and after the marriage began, which would be a sign that this person did not take fidelity seriously, because you're promising to be faithful and true to this person. If someone has a girlfriend or a boyfriend on the side before they're married and enters marriage within this state, are they understanding the marriage vow? No, that would be a ground for an annulment. So maybe that's what happened. But infidelity itself, after the marriage bond takes place, is not a ground for an annulment. You have to look at, the annulment is based upon what happened at the time the marriage vows were changed. Okay? If something was wrong then it's possible to get an annulment. Okay? Yes, Carrie, what?
So like what if the guy or the girl kills someone and then goes to jail? Can you get a divorce and get an annulment? Or
No. What God has joined, no human power can separate. Our sins cannot separate what God has joined. That's what it boils down to. Okay?
Isn't that kind of unfair though?
Well, it's you remain married to that person. God has made you.
And you have to remain faithful.
Yes. God has made you no longer two, but one flesh. And what God has joined, no human power can separate. The spouses themselves can't break the bond, no matter what they do. Okay? Yes. Emma.
When you get an annulment, like how can you do it like years later, or do you have to do it like? If it's
You can do it years later. Yes. And oftentimes, I'll just say this: people come to me after they have been, quote, remarried civilly, and they want to be able to receive communion. So they come to me and say, I'll try to petition for an annulment. Just because someone asks for one doesn't mean they'll get it. But if there are grounds, the church will investigate and grant it.
How long does
And then the people who have been civilly married, then they can be married in the church. And usually it takes about a year in this archdiocese to investigate a case and to make a determination whether there were grounds for an annulment. Okay? So
if you're married to someone and you get a divorce, not an annulment, and then you get married to another person,
well,
is that marriage?
you attempt getting married. You're not really married because God has
Would you
joined
still be married to
But
the first person?
you are married to the first person. Yes. Yeah, you're married to the first person. If you're made one flesh with someone, you can't be one flesh with someone else. That's what indissolubility means. Okay. That's what it means. Okay. Michael. Michael, look at me. Okay. What are you laughing about? I'm not
All
following.
these questions become, they're like all the same questions.
No, they're not. They're different nuances on different aspects of this question. It's a complex reality. Okay. What an annulment is. It's I have to explain this to people when people come into me. When they've been civilly remarried and they know they can't receive communion, but they would like to. They'd like to have their marriage take place in the church, so they're really married. They will have a marriage investigated to see if there's a possibility for an annulment. Yes.
Okay, sorry for the question, Mike, but
You don't have to
So, like-
apologize. No,
Sorry,
no.
keep going.
Okay. Yes.
so my aunt she got married, she had problems with the relationship and everything, but then she got divorced. But she's dating a new guy, and they're engaged, but they've been engaged forever, so I don't know if they're ever gonna officially get married. But I think she takes communion at church, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I don't exactly know the whole story because nobody will tell me.
Okay. Well.
But
Well, the obstacle for taking communion. Okay. Brett, please face me. I'm up here. I'm not back there. Okay.
Brett.
What did you say? I said jet. I mean jet. Did I say Brett? Okay. Yes. The obstacle for receiving communion is the act of adultery. That's what it is. So if someone is maybe seeing someone, as long as they're not committing the act of adultery, they can receive communion. But someone who is civilly divorced without an annulment, I tell them, don't be entering into a relationship with anyone, because it may lead to adultery easily, and then you're committing a grave sin, which excludes you from communion, which excludes you from heaven. Okay? So, seek an annulment first. That's what I tell people. Okay? That's in charity. I have to tell people the truth. Okay? Because it's only the act of adultery, which is having sexual relations with someone not your spouse, that excludes you from communion. And even older Catholics don't understand this. I had an uncle who died. He didn't receive communion for 60 years. He was divorced, never remarried. And he just thought because being divorced, he couldn't receive communion. He never knew this until his deathbed. And my mother told him, well, you were never with other women. You could have received communion. He said, really? I didn't know that. He thought divorce was the reason for not being able to receive communion. No, it's adultery. It's having sexual relations with someone not your spouse. That's what excludes you from communion. So, yes?
So if you commit adultery before
Before
marriage, if you have sex before marriage with another
Yes.
person, does that mean that you're not in union with your spouse when you marry them?
well, no, the fact that someone has had sexual relations with someone else before they're married, okay, that's the sin of fornication. Okay? Sex before marriage. You would confess that. Okay? You would confess it. You would say, I'm sorry, I'll try not to do it again. And you get absolution, so that when you are married, you can live happily ever after with your spouse. Okay? But infidelity means, okay, what does this mean? It means being faithful and true. Another way of saying this, exclusivity. Okay? Exclusivity. Okay? You're with one person. Okay? One person. Okay? And that is because you're made one flesh with that person. Okay? The marriage bond joins you and makes you one flesh. You're taking the marriage promise, saying, I promise to be faithful and true to you. Okay? Exclusivity. And what this means also is that the spouse's bodies no longer belong to themselves. That's what being made one flesh is, okay? The spouse's bodies, okay? Their bodies, okay, are no longer their own, okay? No longer their own. I tell people in marriage preparation that after you take your promise, okay, your body is no longer your own. Your body will belong to your spouse, and your body will belong to your spouse. That's what being made one flesh is. It's an exclusive relationship, just between the two spouses. That's why to have sexual relations with someone else is adultery. And even this is adultery. Looking at another person lustfully is adultery of the heart. That's what Jesus says. If you look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery. That's what Jesus says. A woman could do that too. Look at a man imagining to have sex with this person, fantasizing about this. This is adultery of the heart, okay? Which is easy to do, okay? Especially when people have problems in their marriage and they start looking elsewhere, but you can't do that. You have to rely on God's grace, okay? So the three goods of marriage: permanency, okay? Indissolubility. Second, fidelity. And third is what? Give you a hint. None of you would be here without this good of marriage. What is the third good of marriage? Anyone?
Open to children.
Yes. Third is children, okay? Children. That's the third good of marriage. Okay? Harry doesn't want to.
No, I do.
And what we mean here is, okay, procreation and education of procreation and education of children. Because once you procreate them, we have to educate them, form them. Okay? Form them and educate them. Okay? So it's procreation, education of children. That's the third good of marriage. Now, did Mr. Pitpain go into what procreation means? Okay. Did he go into that? What does procreation mean? What does procreation mean, Chris? What does that mean? Pro means with. With whom? With whom do the couple create with? Rebecca, whom? God. Okay. They cooperate in their human love with God's potentially life-creating love. Okay? So, did Mr. Petbean draw my diagram on the board? God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Did he do that?
Probably.
He didn't.
Probably.
He didn't do
We
that.
talked about it a lot.
Well, he didn't. Yeah, he talked about. But did he draw my diagram?
I have none.
He didn't draw the diagram. Okay, got this? Okay, got this? Now, we're made in God's image and likeness, right? Okay? That means we have to think like God and act like God. Okay? Married couples act like God when they do this. They act like God. And I'm going to show you how they act like God. Okay? So. Okay. And in 2 minutes, I'm going to give you Trinitarian theology. Okay? 3 persons in one God. Okay? God the Father. Okay? God the Father. Okay? Let me just ask a question here, because this is a question I asked to my second graders, preparing them for their first communion to make sure they understand the Trinity. Did God the Father come before God the Son? Yes or no? Did God the Father come before God the Son? Yes or no?
They're the same.
Did God the Father come before God the Son? Yes or no? No. No. Because if God the Son came after God the Father, he wouldn't be God. God is eternal. Okay? That's what we mean by saying the Father eternally begets the Son. Okay? He begets eternally. Okay? Eternally
Attention, boys soccer practice will be at 4 o'clock today, not 5 p.m. Again, boys soccer practice will be at 4 today and not 5 p.m. Will Peckus, please come to the main office at the bell. Will Peckus comes to the main office at the bell.
Okay. God the Father eternally begets the Son, who is the Word. Okay. We, with our human minds, mañana.